Hi, welcome to Globejotting. I'm Dave Fox in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Joan Lindsay Kerr has contributed several of her travel tales to Globejotting.com. She and her husband Rob are very experienced travelers, and they are about to take off on a new adventure. They're going on their first trip to Southeast Asia. They are headed to Thailand soon. Well, Joan emailed me recently, and she said she was having a few jitters about exploring new territory, as many of us do when we wander into unfamiliar places. She and Rob will eventually be joining a tour in Thailand, but when they first arrive, they will be spending a few days in Bangkok on their own, and they're not quite sure what to expect getting around that big and sometimes hectic city. So to talk about some of her concerns, Joan and I did a mini travel coaching session on Skype, which Joan has kindly allowed me to share with you here. One thing I want to mention before I play this for you. Our conversation focuses in part on some of the common scams that one encounters in Bangkok. And it's important to know before you travel anywhere what sorts of pitfalls to watch out for. Knowing about them not only keeps you safer, it also helps you feel safer, which means you just have a more relaxed, more enjoyable trip. So these are important things to talk about, but I do want to mention before we get into this, I love Thailand, and I find most Thai people to be delightful and gentle and very happy to help other people out in a jam. So as we are talking about scams and ripoffs in big city Bangkok, please keep in mind these are legitimate concerns, but the minority of people pulling these scams is by no means indicative of the average Thai person. On that note, here is our travel coaching session. Joan spoke with me from her home in Bakersfield, California. Now, I live in Vietnam where the internet infrastructure is sometimes a bit shaky, so I apologize. The video does get a little bit glitchy in a couple of spots, but the audio works just fine, and we had a great conversation. So here it is, my travel coaching session via Skype with Joan Lindsay Kerr, talking about her upcoming trip to Thailand. Hello, Joan. Welcome to Globejotting. So you are off to Thailand. It is your first trip to Southeast Asia, but you've traveled a lot before. You've taken many trips to Europe, and you've been to Central America, but you're feeling a little bit nervous about this trip to Thailand. And I know you said you're going on a tour, but you've got a few days on your own in Bangkok at the beginning. So what's giving you the jitters here? What's making you nervous?
Okay, well, I'm usually a pretty confident traveler. We do travel quite a bit. But this is a completely unfamiliar area. And I looked at the maps of Bangkok and they looked, okay, well, I think I can figure this out. And then I looked at the pictures of some of the places on the map and there are all these big buildings in the way. So, the Thai language is so unfamiliar and the alphabet is even completely different. So when I look at it, it means absolutely nothing. So I'm just concerned about when we very first arrive, how do we figure out how to get to our hotel? And then once we're moving around Bangkok on our own for a few days, how do we figure out how to get places?
Right. Well, first of all, keep in mind that Thailand is very well set up for tourism. So as far as the alphabet goes, any sorts of signs that you are likely to need, let's say getting out of the airport, getting to major tourist attractions, things like that, they will be written both in the Thai alphabet and in our alphabet, so and in English. So getting around is really not that hard as far as the language is concerned. English is all over Asia the lingua franca. It's what everybody uses. If a Thai person needs to talk to a Vietnamese person, for example, there's a good chance that they will speak in at least very basic English. So I find I've never encountered a language problem in Thailand. I've not spent a lot of time in Bangkok specifically, but I've made several trips elsewhere in Thailand, and I've never had a problem with the language. I think you always will find someone who can help you, either because you find an English speaker or people are pretty patient, and one thing that's really nice about the Thai mentality is that it really is it's such a cliche to talk about the happy locals, but when you talk about the Thais, it's really it's a very calm and joyful and outgoing culture, and people are quite happy to help. Even if there is a language barrier, they'll work with you on it. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
Oh, that's great. That's really good to hear. So even out in the countryside, do you find someone around who can speak English?
Usually you will. Again, keeping in mind this is going to be your first trip there. You're not going way off the beaten path by yourself. You're going to be with your tour group when you're going into some of the more rural areas. But even if you were traveling on your own, I would say that yes, generally you will usually find someone who speaks at least rudimentary English or has had some contact with tourists and is used to communicating. Sometimes it takes a little longer. You have to be a little bit patient and just see it as part of the game. You know, I see a lot of travelers get really flustered by language barriers, and if you approach it with the right attitude, they can be kind of fun. Just look at it as a challenge and part of the whole travel experience.
Yeah, actually, we've had encounters like that, even in Europe, where I can sort of figure out what the language is. And we always make a point of making sure that we learn a few of the words before we go, the greetings and good morning and please and thank you, things like that. So I'm going to try and do that. The great thing is there are YouTube videos now with languages, just about every language you could imagine,
right,
where you can learn at least the greetings and things like that. But it's so unrelated to the languages I know. So it's like memorizing completely unfamiliar words.
Right, yeah. But again, if you learn just a couple of basic greetings, just being able to say hello and thank you, people will really be warm to that. And so it's great to do that. But beyond that, I just wouldn't worry too much about the language barrier.
Okay.
So, yeah. Now, you had talked about your concerns about getting around and navigating Bangkok on your own. It's, I will be honest with you, it's one of the more daunting cities that I have traveled in Southeast Asia in terms of finding your way around. For one thing, there are just so many options there. And so figuring out which option is the best one to go with requires a little bit of thought. They've got taxis, they've got tuk-tuks, they've got 2 different train systems, and then a variety of different river systems, everything from hop-on, hop-off tourist boats to private water taxis. There is a great website. It's Bangkok.com, and if you go to Bangkok.com and click on the tab at the top of the page, it says Good to Know and then Getting Around Bangkok, and just scroll down there.
Perfect.
They have a wonderful overview of all of the transportation options for Bangkok. You mentioned specifically getting from the airport to your hotel.
Right.
Which airport are you flying into? Are you going into the big international airport?
The big international one.
So they now have trains that will go to downtown. That is one option. That would be your cheapest option. If you want to just keep things really simple, then you're looking at taxis. Now, taxis in Bangkok, you need to be a little careful with the driver. If you are going to be just arriving and you're going to be jet lagged, you'll have been flying all the way from the United States and you're going to be pretty tired when you get there, one thing you might check with is see if your hotel can offer any sort of a pickup service. You'll pay a little extra for it, and this is not something that I always recommend, but considering the jet lag factor and the travel fatigue factor, you know that they are sending someone who they trust, who is not going to rip you off. You may pay more than you would for a standard taxi, but you have that peace of mind of knowing
we actually
exactly
did that in Turkey, and it worked out really well because our name was on a plaque, and so it was really easy to get there. So it was really worth the extra expense just to not have to worry about it when we arrived. So I'll check with the hotel. That's good advice. Now, we have heard about being careful about the taxis, and you just said something about that. So what are the things you need to look out for?
The things you need to look out for, basically, they will try to overcharge you. It has been my experience. I'm generalizing, and that can be said for taxi drivers in many countries all over the world, including the United States. But, it's particularly bad in Bangkok at times. If you're getting in a private taxi, make sure that they have the meter running. And I don't know if this is a game they play in Bangkok. Something I have encountered a lot in Kuala Lumpur is they'll say, oh, no, it's cheaper without the meter. Or something like that. It's not cheaper without the meter. Make sure they turn the meter on. You might want to do a little bit of reading up on, are there, and this is general advice for Southeast Asian travel, not necessarily exclusive to Bangkok, but are there taxi companies that are particularly good or bad? Here in Saigon, there are a couple companies that you can generally trust. And then there are these other operations, much smaller companies, where the meters run at 3 times the rate, and they will try to overcharge you in all kinds of ways. So If you're going with a metered taxi, just make sure the meter is on. It's good to have a general idea of where you're going and what the fare should be. I also will say that I think that getting ripped off by taxi drivers is part of I call it the travel tax that we pay. And if that does happen, as long as it's not for hundreds of dollars, if you lose an extra $5 or $10, don't let it ruin your day. I've seen people get really upset about these things, and it's not worth the anxiety that causes you and the way it drags down your trip, because really, in the great scheme of life, that extra $10 they scammed out of you is probably not going to make a huge difference in your life. And so if that happens, just try to roll with it, and keep in mind the alternative is staying home and never going anywhere. Now, with the tuk-tuk drivers, they operate a little bit differently from the taxis. They do not have meters. What you do in a tuk-tuk is you negotiate a fare ahead of time. And again, do some reading up on the going rate these days. When I was in Bangkok, and it's been about 3 years almost since I was there, but when I was there, it was about 200 to 300 Thai baht, which is about $7 to $10 US, for a ride around the city. That's what they charge tourists. They are charging local Thai people a lot less than that. There's really nothing you can do about that. Taking the tuk-tuks is still fun, so just be aware of that, but find out what the going rate is. Again, you can always ask your hotel, what is a fair price to pay for a tuk-tuk ride? But always, this is very important, negotiate the price ahead of time. Right. And once you negotiate that price, do not waver for it. These drivers, some of them are great. Some of them are totally honest people, and I don't want to give all tuk-tuk drivers a bad name here. But I had one guy, and he kept. We agreed on 200 baht to give me a ride across town, and then he started saying, "Okay, no, it's going to be 400 because traffic's very bad today." And I said, "Traffic's bad in Bangkok every day. Don't fall for that line. No, it's extra cost today because traffic's bad." They know how traffic is there. They work there, and if you hit bad traffic in Bangkok, it's because Bangkok always has bad traffic. So, don't fall for that line. Set a price ahead of time. Know the standard going tourist rate, and then sit back and enjoy the ride. And then when you get to your destination, if he's really being pushy about charging you more, just hand him the money and walk away. One thing that's very helpful is be sure to save small enough bills so that you have, let's say it's a 300 baht ride, you want to have three 100 baht notes handy. If all you have is a 500, he'll play another game. Very common. "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have change." Right. And if you do get stuck in that situation, then say, "Okay, please wait here. I will go get change." And make him wait. Get out and walk away and go get the change and bring him his money back. But that's another game, because then people they get flustered. They don't, and they'll say, "All right, here, just take my money." And so you do need to stand your ground a little bit with some of the tuk-tuk drivers. But again, it's a fun way to get around. It's a traditional Thai way of getting around. And I would say go on at least one tuk-tuk ride in Bangkok, because it's kind of fun.
Okay, that sounds like fun. I had been wondering about that because I'd been hearing, be careful. So, but it does sound like fun. How far did they go? I mean, can you go all over town in a tuk-tuk?
Yeah, they'll take you all over the city, and just like a taxi, they work sort of on the same way as a taxi would work. So yeah,
these are motorized, right?
Yeah, so a tuk-tuk is basically it's kind of like a cross between a motorcycle and a pickup truck, although they're covered, but they will have a motorcycle engine, and tuk-tuks look different from country to country. It's actually fun to travel around Southeast Asia and look how every country kind of does its tuk-tuks a little differently, but usually you'll have at least seats for a couple of people behind the driver, and and it's got a motorcycle engine. They're noisy, and they don't have like closed windows or anything, so you're out there, you're exposed to the traffic noise and the smog and so forth, but it's part of the whole urban jungle experience that you get that is part of Bangkok.
It sounds fun. That's good.
Yeah.
So what other things do you recommend that we look out for? What things go on in Southeast Asia that we might need to be aware of?
What goes on in Southeast Asia and what goes on in Bangkok? Let me take each of those a little bit separately, and I'll start with Bangkok. One of the most classic scams in Bangkok is particularly around the Royal Palace and also some of the other big tourist sites, people will come up to you and they will tell you, oh, the palace is closed for the day, or it closed early today. I'm very sorry, but you're very lucky because today is a very special Buddhist holiday, and I can take you. I'm a professional tour guide, and they'll have a little badge that they're wearing, which may or may not be real, and they'll say, I can take you across town to the special ceremony today. You're very lucky that you found me. And they will take you somewhere that you weren't planning on going, and they will charge you a lot of money for it. The Royal Palace, finding the main tourist entrance to that palace it took me a very long time. It's a massive compound, and there are other entrances that are not the tourist entrance. And the guards that I encountered there were not super helpful, I'm sorry to say, in helping me find my way around the block to where I really needed to be. So I had this guy following me for an entire block going, sir, no, you can't go in today. Ignore those people. Smile. Be cordial. Just say thank you, no thank you, and keep walking. And I always find, I'll smile and I'll say no thanks, and then I will keep walking. Eventually, I stop talking to them. I stop acknowledging them. They might still follow you for another half a block, but they will eventually get bored and realize you're not stopping to talk to them, and and they'll go find another victim. So don't fall for that scam, because it's something that you are likely to hear a lot in Thailand. As far as general scams here, you've traveled in big European cities. You've been to Rome. You've been to Paris. You know the basic things. Just be aware there is pickpocketing. There's petty theft. There is, bag snatchings go on. There's very little violent crime that is likely to occur to you as a tourist in Bangkok for a few days, or in really most Southeast Asian cities, as long as you're using basic common sense. But keep your valuables close to you. If you have anything like a camera, try to keep it as inconspicuous as possible. Wear a money belt of some sort. Keep your money or your passport on your clothing. Basic stuff. The same precautions that you would exercise in any major European city. If you exercise those in Southeast Asia, you should be fine.
Good. Yeah, if I have a vest with inner pockets, is that pretty safe?
Yeah, I think anything that keeps your valuables underneath your clothing, where they're just harder to get at, works really well. One of the things with pickpockets is they're going for the easy targets. And so if you make yourself a difficult target, they just won't waste their time with you, because there are plenty of people walking around with their wallet sort of, halfway out of their pocket. They got their camera just hanging off their shoulder. Those guys are easy, and I've seen people here in Saigon. I've watched people get robbed. Cell phones are a big thing that people are going for these days. If you've got an iPhone or something like that,
we're not even taking it.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'll just mention to other people watching this, though, that people are actually the thieves and the pickpockets, the petty thieves. They're a lot more likely to go for a smartphone than they are for your wallet these days, because a phone is worth a lot more than what most people have in their wallets. So, don't keep your phone out on a restaurant table or something like that. That's a big mistake I see people doing a lot.
My problem will always be my camera, because my camera's in my hand pretty much 100% of the time that I'm traveling.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I'm a photographer, and I love to take pictures when I travel, and so I do carry a fairly fancy-looking camera around with me. Whenever you travel with a camera like that, it is just a risk you run. Back up your photos every night. Are you bringing a laptop of any kind with you?
A tablet, yes.
Okay, great. So if you can
I do back them up every night.
If you can back up your photos every night, at least if your camera does get stolen or for that matter damaged. I fell in a river with my camera a couple of years ago.
I remember.
Yeah, I've got a whole story about it on Globejotting, and it was just one of those freak moments where I face planted myself in 4 or 6 inches of water. It wasn't very deep, but it trashed my $1,000 camera. But luckily I backed up all of my photos, and so things like that can happen as well. So keep your photos backed up. I always have traveled. I've had a few things go missing when I was traveling, either because I lost them or because they were stolen. And again, that's something I see as part of the risk we run when we travel. If your camera does get stolen, it's very frustrating. But again, try to not let it ruin your entire rest of your experience, which is what you're really there for, So, but just keep it close to you. Be aware of what's going on around you, and where you're taking it out. Usually, if somebody approaches you and they are up to no good, very often we can sense that in the back of our heads. And very often we aren't 100% sure, and so we don't want to offend people, and so we are nice to them, we're polite to them. You can be polite but also be firm. So if something doesn't feel right to you, get out of that situation, get away from that person. Just tell them you have to go somewhere, you have other plans, and walk away.
Yeah.
But yeah, do keep your valuables kind of close to you. Petty theft is an issue, but really no different than any of the other places where you've traveled.
No, exactly.
The same precautions.
That's right. Always have to be aware. Great, Dave. Well, this really helped. Thanks.
Yeah,
tips.
I hope so, and good luck. Have a wonderful trip. I'm really glad that you are, moving on, because you've spent a lot of time in Europe. You've been to Central America, so it's great to hit a whole new culture. I've been living in Southeast Asia for 4.5 years now, and I absolutely love it here. So have fun, and I would love to hear back from you. Maybe we can check back in after your trip and hear how it all went.
Absolutely. All right.
Joan Kerr in Bakersfield. Thanks very much for talking with us. If you'd like to find out how Joan's trip goes, she has a blog. You can check it out at travelswithrobbie.com. I will also put a link to that on the Globejotting website and on YouTube. Whenever you travel to a part of the world that's unfamiliar, it's normal to feel a little anxiety ahead of time. But the best way to guarantee yourself a lousy trip is to want everything to go perfectly. Arriving in a new destination, especially when you're dizzy with jet lag, you don't speak the language, maybe you're not used to the climate, things are looking, sounding, even smelling different from what you're used to, that can all feel disconcerting at first. When you wander outside your cultural comfort zone, it's inevitable things are going to go a little haywire at times. When they do, remind yourself this is all part of the adventure, even the moments when things go wrong. Travel in foreign places isn't always easy, but the stories we accumulate are priceless. We get to keep those for a lifetime, and our most challenging moments often become our best stories later. Many thanks again to Joan Kerr in Bakersfield, California, for chatting with us. Like I said earlier, Joan has contributed a couple of her other travel tales to Globejotting.com. You will find those, plus a lot more other travel stories, humor columns, tips and online workshops to help you write your own stories. You will also find full details on the writer and travel consulting services and coaching services I offer at Globejotting.com. If you have a question for me about travel or writing that you'd like me to answer in a future video, you can drop me an email. My address is dave@globejotting.com. Thank you so much for watching in Ho Chi Minh City. I'm Dave Fox for Globejotting.